Well, welcome to the Sandbox, guys. Let's open up with the blessing as well. We just got done praying. Sorry, I didn't record the prayer, but let's open up with the blessing, and then we'll talk about what we're going to do tonight, and then we'll go forward. So, Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kiddushanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu la'asok b'vrei Torah. Amen. Blessed are you, Lord God, ruler of the universe, who sanctifies us in your commandments and commands us concerning the study of the instructions or the Torah of God, in Yeshua's name. Amen. Amen. Awesome. Well, we're going to actually begin a study, and I don't want to rush through this study because I think it's really, really important. And this is on Genesis 1. So this is going to be looking at the creation account. And believe it or not, we're not going to get so much into science, but we are going to have science added to it, or the idea behind science and creation. And we're going to be looking at Genesis 1 and the fact that Genesis 1 factors in the entire understanding of the rest of the Bible. And so Genesis 1 is very, very important. It uses words that first time that we see in literature. It uses words that are introduced to us. And so this might seem like an easy thing. We're just going to look at the days of creation and then say, okay, well, what's so hard about that? But this is actually really interesting when we get into this, because it's not going to be dealing with whether or not we have a round earth or a flat earth. It's not going to be dealing with any of those kinds of things, whether it's the Bible scientific or not scientific. But we're going to talk about the purpose behind Genesis 1, the whole purpose behind the creation account. And I think this is really cool. So we're going to look at it. And I encouraged you guys a couple of weeks ago to get a book. And I just want to encourage you guys, if you want to get the book between now and next week, because I do want to give up shout out credit to John H. Walton. And I'll just put this book up here. John H. Walton wrote a book called The Lost World of Genesis 1. And John H. Walton is a scholar who deals, now some of these guys are just amazing. They say more in the introduction than most books say in 20 chapters. John H. Walton is a scholar and focusing on Second Temple Judaism as well as ancient Near Eastern languages. There's a lot of stuff like that. Michael Heiser is another great scholar. All these scholars, what I love about these scholars is, and I even though I'm a fan of that time, and even though my doctoral degree was in Second Temple Judaism, I've fallen in love with the ancient cultures, the ancient Near Eastern cultures. And because it's like when you understand what they're thinking, you understand how they interpreted text. What did they think about when they pictured God? What did they think about when they pictured creation? What went through their mind? These are things that are really, really amazing because they don't translate to today. And that's really sad. They don't translate in the way that we would expect them to translate to us today. And so it's really difficult for us. So looking at Genesis, and we have the Hebrew language there, you look at it, how does that translate to us today? And then how are we reading it? And are we really getting into the minds of the ancient Near Eastern culture to understand what God is really trying to say and what he's really trying to talk about within this Genesis model, okay? And so I'm going to bring up, I was looking for the books I had over here, but I set them aside. I have one, but I wanted to read to you out of the transparency passage in the Bible. And I thought I had it over here, but let me just look for it real quick. I don't know what happened to it. Let me get that. I should have been prepared, everybody. I am. Linda's prepared. I'm not prepared. Let me grab it. I think it's just right here. All right. Okay, so this is really cool, but let's talk about, you've heard me talk about idioms before in the past. So it's important to get the biblical idioms or the Hebraic idioms or the Hebraisms is another word for it, of the ancient culture. And it's one thing to look at the culture 2,000 years ago when Yeshua's here. And we've done a really good job of trying to do it. But how do you look at the idioms or the culture of, I mean, how do you literally get to the culture 6,000 years ago? 5,800 years ago, thousands of years ago, the ancient of Adam and Eve. How do we get in that mindset? And we can sit there and say, well, we can use the Bible, we can use the literature, to get in the culture, but that's a circular argument, right? And so it's like, how can you use the Bible to get into their language, and how do you use the language to get into the culture? It's very difficult. And so translating is one thing. So people who translate in from one language to another language is actually pretty difficult in its own. But what's more difficult is translating culture into our culture and into our language. That's the hard part. So I got some fun ones here for you. Let me yep, I got your test, Kathy. You're on there. Yay. Okay, let me share with you guys some idioms that I found that are really funny just from Mexico. Okay, so these are Mexican idioms. I don't know who this is. There's some Mexican idioms that I want to read about, or I want us to see. And then with these Mexican idioms, I want you to see if you can translate them into an American understanding. Hi, Dr. Shirley Pierre. Hi, can I see your face?
You want to see your face?
What's that?
Hold on, it's my friend, Rabbi. She's with me.
Oh, okay, great.
Dr. Shirley.
Dr. Shirley, I'm gonna go ahead and mute you just so that there's no feedback.
Okay.
Thank you. Okay, great. Well, thank you for joining us. We're talking about Genesis 1, and we're going to talk about idioms and how important it is to get into the mindset of the ancient Near Eastern culture when we look at Genesis, because it's going to surprise you. This study is going to be really interesting because it's going to go in it's going to give you a different paradigm shift, a different way of thinking about Genesis and why God created the heavens and the earth and all this kind of stuff. And this is going to be pretty amazing. But we're talking about idioms right now. So let me share a couple of Spanish idioms with you and just see if you can, just from Mexico, Mexican idioms, that to see if they would translate into today's culture. Oh, we got another one coming on. We have two Shirleys coming on. Okay, so here's one. Okay, so I'll say this, and then you guys can unmute if you want to try to do it. I'll give it to you and see what that means. Dargato or libre. Dargato or libre, which means to give cat for hare. H-A-R-E for rabbit. To give cat for rabbit, or hare. H-A-R-E, not H-A-I-R. Okay, so what do you guys think that means? To give cat for hare. Who wants to try to translate that from his Spanish into English, and what would that mean? What would that idiom be? Who wants to give it a shot? So dargato or libre. That means to give cat for hare. Let's see. Somebody put something in the chat. Let's see. Okay. Sushi. I love it. I love it. That is awesome. That is really great. You guys look at the chat. That's awesome. You know what? That's really actually pretty good to give Dargato por libre, to give cat for hair, for sushi. That's really good. Okay, well, that means to cheat or to trick someone. So to basically give a cat for a rabbit is to trick them, thinking that they're getting a rabbit, but they're really getting a cat, right? So pretty interesting, but it's a Mexican idiom. Now I want sushi. Absolutely. There's a kimchi place, by the way. If you guys, there's a Korean restaurant on North University Road, and it's between Royal Palm and Sample. It's somewhere between that area on the right hand, if you're going north, it'll be on the east side. It's called Kimchi, and it's a Korean grocery store. And they used to have a coffee shop in the inside, but not a lot of people are getting coffee. Now they have a sushi bar there, or a sushi place where you can go in and buy sushi at the grocery store. They have the freshest sushi I've ever seen in any store or any restaurant ever. If you're seriously, if you're going up North University Drive and you're heading north, like you're going to Parkland, you get past Royal Palm, and on the right-hand side, you'll see it's a Korean grocery store called Kimchi. And it's actually a great grocery store. It's got great prices, everything, tons of type of stuff in there and everything like that. But when you first walk in, there's a sushi bar on the right-hand side where they make fresh sushi. And I got to tell you, that was the most fresh sushi I have ever seen, the most colorful, the most beautiful sushi I've ever had is in that little place right there. And so anyhow, shout out to that. Yes.
I would like to make a comment on the cat for the.
Yeah, that's, we're getting back to that. So go for it.
Oh, okay. Well, I'm wondering if it's common in Hispanic culture to eat rabbit. I know it is a lot
Sure,
common a lot
sure, it
around
is
the
very-
world, and not so common to eat cat.
Exactly.
So then that is like Ingrid says, the switcheroo.
The
If
old
it's all
switcheroo.
butchered, you might not be able to tell the difference.
Exactly, and that's the deception behind it. So what it means to us is to cheat or to trick someone. So that's a great idiom, a Mexican idiom to give cat for hair. So dar gato por libre, or liebre, not libre. Libre is freedom, but liebre is hair. Okay, so here's another one. No tener pelos en la lengua. Okay, so I'll say it again. No tener pelos en la lengua. Okay, so this means to not have hair on your tongue. What would that mean to us? So it's a Mexican idiom, but what would that mean to us today? To not have hair on your tongue. What would some of your guys's idiom phrase be for that? An English idiom phrase to that. Isn't that interesting? I love these comments now. Now I want sushi, the old switcheroo. I like that by Ingrid. That's really great. Yeah, so this no tener pelos en la lengua means to not have hair on your tongue, and this is what it means. It means to be straightforward and not to mince words. So it's basically being straightforward, just saying it like it is. Okay, which is funny to them, having hair on the tongue means that there's a deception there. Or they're not being straightforward. See, that would be, so you can see these idioms in Mexico. How do you take an idiom that's done in Mexico in Spanish, translate it to American or to English? I'm sorry, not to American, but to English with an American idiom added to it. Because even English speakers across the world have different idioms and they use different idioms. Here's another one. Tener mala leche. Tener mala leche. Linda got this one. She was able to kind of get this switcheroo on this one. But here it's to have bad milk. To have bad milk. Tener mala leche. And it means to be someone who acts mean or is in a bad mood. Because you think about milk going sour and give somebody sour milk, pretty much, it's like, ugh, turn them in a bad mood or something. You pretty much guessed that. You were pretty close to guessing that. So that's really good. Let me read a couple more because I think these are really funny, but this gives the idea of what we're talking about, why you can't just read the Bible in English and then get this idea behind it in a Western modern perspective, because there's things that are said in the Bible that don't make sense to us. And if we look at it from a modern perspective, they never make sense to us. Okay, here's another one. Ser pan comido. Ser pan comido means to be bread eaten. So to be bread eaten. What does that mean? Somebody want to guess on that one? To be bread eaten. Let's see if somebody wants to type that one in. Go for it. Somebody just be brave, be bold. Let me say it again. Ser pan comido. This one's actually pretty easy if you think about it. So ser pan comido means to be bread eaten. It means something is easy or it's like a piece of cake. So like eating bread. Eating bread, it's a simple thing. It's easy as cake. So when somebody, consumed with something, okay, that's good, Kathy. That's a good one. Consumed with something. That's a pretty good idea behind it. But what it really means to us is something that's a piece of cake. It's like, hey, you can do this. It's a piece of cake. So they'd say ser pan comido. It's like eating cake, eating bread. It's not much to it. Okay, so that's pretty cool. Let's do a couple more because I think they're pretty cool. Meter, this one's interesting. Meter la pata or pata. I say pata, I'm doing a Hebrew accent to that one. Meter la pata, which means to put the paw in. So think about like a dog paw or a cat paw in. meter la pata, which means to put the paw in. What do you guys think that means? And actually, it makes pretty good sense when you think about the English, English idiom.
I'll
Yes.
take a guess of maybe testing something. When an animal puts their paw into something, they're sort of testing or
Testing the
feeling
waters.
it out or
Mhm. It's a
Did you
good,
say
it's a good
pot
choice.
or paw?
What's that?
Did you say pot or paw?
Uh, uh, pata. So meter la pata. So that means
P-A-W?
P-A-T-A.
no in English.
Oh, pa, P-A-W. Yes, P-A-W.
Oh, I thought you had said the pot. I was like, put something on in the oven.
Oh, okay. Sorry.
Put the pot in.
This
I
one means
agree
to
with
put the
Linda.
pond.
I agree with Linda. Testing.
Okay. Now, Kathy put on here to get involved or be a part of. Okay,
That's
that's really
good.
good. But this
Mhm.
one translates to us the same as putting, basically putting your shoe in your mouth or tasting leather. So it means meter la pata means to put the pawn, means to make a mistake or to put your foot in it. So interesting, right? Even though we know the words, you get the words. Even though we know the words, we don't get the idiom because the idiom is what's really the cultural aspect of it. Let me read a couple more.
It gives it the meaning.
What's that?
It gives it the meaning.
The culture does,
Mhm.
right? Yeah, not just the translation. So another one is tomar el pelo. Tomar el pelo, which means to take the hair. Hair, to take the hair. Tomar el pelo, which means to take the hair. What do you guys mean that what do you guys think that might mean? To take the hair. So if I was to take the hair from Linda, which is really kind of a mean thing, but what it
Ouchie,
means is
ouchie.
ouchie.
Sounds, it sounds like you're being mean.
Okay, it does. It sounds like you're being mean, but here's what it means. Tomar el pelo, to take the hair, means to make fun of someone or to fool them. So you're getting them by the hair. It's like I think about the schoolgirl, where they would pull the ponytail, which is still mean, but you're teasing them, right? You're teasing them with the ponytail. Or back in the old days when our parents were kids, they would put the ponytails in the ink wells.
Mhm.
They dip them into the inkwell, all the ladies who do that.
Mhm.
So let's do a couple more because I think these are really fun because they show us the idea behind here. A lo hecho pecho. To the deed done chest. That's what that means. It says to the deed done chest. C-H-E-S-T. What do you guys think that would mean? To the deed done chest. So a lo hecho pecho. So it's kind of cool how
I
it reads.
think it means you really hurt me. Whatever you did, you hurt me.
Okay, that's a really good aspect of that. Okay, now so let me say it again. A lo hecho pecho, to the deed done chest, and it means to accept something that has already happened and move on. So it's kind of like what we're saying, what we say is put it in our rear view mirror, right? We would say, oh, that's in our rear view mirror. You accept it and you move on. And so this one's kind of interesting. A lo hecho pecho. So that's pretty good. And then let's do one last one. Tirar la casa por la ventana. To throw the house out of the window. To throw the house out the window. Tirar la casa por la ventana. Okay. And it means to spend lavishly or spare no expense. So basically throwing the house out of the window basically means you you spend frivolously. Let's go for it. Let's have a day and just spend whatever we want. It's like it's I'm getting the image of a Pretty Woman, the scene on Pretty Woman where Richard Gere gives Julia Roberts the card and says, whatever you want, and there's no limit type of thing. So that's kind of the idea behind this one. So once somebody says expose, so that's good. I cheated AI says spend lavishly. Way to go, Kathy. Way to go. That's good. So, okay, so I shared all of those with us here, and the people who are going to watch this upcoming week and us, it's so important to understand not just the words that are given to us on the Bible, on the what we read in the Bible, but it's understanding the culture of those times. And cultures are harder to translate. It's so hard to translate a culture, and unless you spend time with that culture. And you know, the same goes for us. For us, I mean, there are some sayings that we have in this country that people that speak English from the United Kingdom, they don't understand our idioms, and vice versa. We don't understand their idioms, and some of their words I don't even get. You know, Linda got to spend what, 8 months there, would you say, or 3 or a year or something, right?
I'm sorry,
In the
to
UK.
UK. Oh, about 3 or 4 months.
3 or 4 months. She got to live and work in the UK, right across from the London Bridge, and
Parliament.
well, the Parliament, but the clock.
Oh, yeah, Big Ben.
Big Ben. She worked right by Big Ben and stuff like that. It must have been really fun. But just understanding the culture of English speaking, like you go to Scotland and that's you, number one, you can't even understand their English, and number two, all their idioms. And you know, Kathy, you and Linda are from Ireland, and you know the Irish have some idioms that we just don't get today, and they speak English, and so it's pretty cool when you see this. So the Bible is no different when it comes to that. The Bible has idioms that we have to understand as a culture. Now, if we just use the Bible to try to define the culture, it doesn't really work very well. So how do you guys think that we actually can figure out a culture? How do you think that some of these scholars who study ancient Near Eastern worlds, and I mean, they can read Sumerian, they can read all these other cultures, the way that they actually get to the idea behind that culture is by reading other texts that have been written that speak about gods, speak about ideas of life. What does it mean? What does it mean when the waters are above the waters and they're separated among each other? In our mindset, we see waters in the sky and we see waters on the earth, and that's what we see. What do they see? And what would the ancients have recognized that? And so you discover culture by reading extra biblical literature from like Samaritan texts and all this other stuff that is written about the same time as some of those things. And it doesn't mean that it doesn't mean that we accept their theology. So that's really important. Now we don't accept the theology of these other things, but we get the idea of how they thought. And the Jewish people, or the Hebrews at this point, or the biblical people during this point, would have thought the same way. Okay, so it's really important. So looking at Genesis 1, let me read it to you from James Tabor. And by the way, for those of you that came in a little bit late, if you can, this is such a great book, one of the best books I've ever read on this subject, especially when it comes to Genesis 1. But this is called The Lost World of Genesis 1. And I just want to give a shout out to John H. Walton. And the subtitle is Ancient Cosmology and the Origins Debate. He writes it very simple. It comes from a scholar, but he writes it to where anybody can read this. Anybody can do a Bible study with it, so to speak, or whatever. But he writes it, he does such a good job in that book. So it's called The Lost World of Genesis 1. And he's written a lot of books that are similar to that same kind of title, The Lost World of something, The Lost World of something, The Lost World of something. But I want to take the time while we're doing this right now is to read the book of Genesis. And this is written by James Tabor. Okay. So this is called the New Translation from the Transparent English Bible. So this is James Tabor is another one of these scholars who taught at Chicago Theology. Let's see, he was a former professor in the Department of Religious Studies at the University of North Carolina at Charlotte, where he teaches biblical studies, ancient Judaism, and early Christianity. And he's also been like a professor emeritus, I think, for Chicago University or something like that. So these guys all spend it, but I love this translation. It's very difficult, but I'll read it to you. Let's just read Genesis chapter 1, and it's quite interesting. But he leaves it to just read the way it does. And I think it's great because when we read it, and so if you guys can listen to what I'm saying here, really try to listen really closely. But this is by James Tabor, and this is Genesis chapter 1. And I'm just going to take the time to read it how he wrote it. But listen to what it's saying, because the way we translate things, especially Genesis 1:1, the way it's been translated is really like really sad. Okay, but let's look at this. Chapter 1, verse 1. At the first of Elohim creating the skies and the land was desolation and emptiness, and darkness was over the face of the deep, and the spirit of Elohim was hovering over the face of the waters. And Elohim said, let there be light. And it was light. And Elohim saw the light, that it was good. And Elohim separated between the light and between the darkness. And Elohim called the light day, and to the darkness he called night, and it was evening, and it was morning, day one. And Elohim said, let there be an expanse in the middle of the waters, and let there be a separating between waters to waters. And Elohim made the expanse, and he separated between the waters that were from under the expanse, and between the waters that were from upon the expanse. And it was thus. And Elohim called to the expanse skies, and it was evening, and it was morning, a second day. And Elohim, verse 9, and Elohim said, let the waters under the skies be gathered toward one place, and let the dry land be seen. And it was thus. And Elohim called to the day land, and to the collection of the waters he called seas. And Elohim saw that it was good. And Elohim said, let the land sprout the sprout, a plant seeding seed, a fruit tree making fruit, according to its type, its seed within it, upon the land. And it was thus. And the land made the sprout go out, a plant seeding seed according to its type, and a tree making fruit its seed within it according to its type. And Elohim saw that it was good. And it was evening, and it was morning, a third day. So if you notice in here, and here's why he's saying a seed, or a planting, or seeding seed. This is really a great, because biblical Hebrew only has about 80,000 words in it compared to modern Hebrew, which is close to 300,000 words or more. I think closer to 400,000 words for modern Hebrew. And maybe it's just 200,000, but it's a lot more than what biblical Hebrew is. So the Bible uses a lot of words over and over and over again. And because English translators don't like to be redundant, they change things around quite a bit. But this translation is great because it's just being transparent. It's just laying it out the way it is, laying it in front of everybody the way it is, and that's what it says. And so you can see some of the ideas, how difficult it is to translate in the English, because it just sounds really wild. But listen to how it speaks, because it actually speaks very simple. Okay, now verse 14. And Elohim said, let there be light in the expanse of the skies, to separate between the day and between the night. And they will be for signs, and for appointed times, and for days and years. And they will be for lights in the expanse of the skies, to make light upon the land. And it was thus. And Elohim made the two large lights, the large light for rule of the day, and the small light for the rule of the night, and the stars. And Elohim gave them in the expanse of the skies to make light upon the land, and to rule in the day and in the night, and to separate between the light and between the darkness. And Elohim saw that it was good. And it was evening, and it was morning, a fourth day. Pretty interesting so far, isn't it? Really, really interesting. Now let's go to verse 20. And Elohim said, let the waters swarm a swarm of living life breathers. That's really what the Hebrew says, but it says something different in our translations. And let the flyer fly upon the land, upon the face of the expanse of the skies. And Elohim created the large water beasts and every living life breather that moves about, with which the waters swarm according to their type, and every winged flyer according to its type. And Elohim saw that it was good, and Elohim blessed them, saying, bear fruit and be abundant. Bear fruit and be abundant, and fill the waters in the seas, and let the flyer be abundant in the land. And it was evening, and it was morning, a fifth day. Now we come down to here. And Elohim said, let the land make a living life breather go out according to its type, animal and moving thing, a living thing of land according to its type. And it was thus. And Elohim made the living thing of the land according to its type, and the animal according to its type, and every moving thing of the soil according to its type. And Elohim saw that it was good. And Elohim said, let us make soil creature in our image, according to our likeness, and let them govern in the fish of the sea, and with the flyer of the skies, and in the animals, and in all the land, and in every moving thing that moves about upon the land. And Elohim created the soil creature in his image. In the image of Elohim, he created him, male and a female, he created them. So here it says, I love this part. It says in verse 27, and Elohim created the soil creature in his image. In the image of Elohim, he created him, a male and a female, he created them. Verse 28, and Elohim blessed them, and Elohim said to them, bear fruit and be abundant and fill the land and subdue and govern in the fish of the sea and in the flyer of the skies and in every living thing that moves about upon the land. And Elohim said, look, I have given to you every plant seeding seed that is upon the face of all the land, and every tree in which there is fruit of a tree, seeding seed to you. It will be for an edible, for it will be, or it will be for an edible thing, and to every living thing of the land, and to every flyer of the skies, and to every moving about thing on the land that in it is living life breath. Every green plant is for an edible thing. And it was thus. And Elohim saw all that he had made, and look, it was exceedingly good. And it was evening, and it was morning, the sixth day. So that's Genesis chapter 1. What a wild translation. Won't you guys agree to that? It's a pretty amazing translation by James Tabor. I recommend it. He's only done Genesis. I don't think he's done Exodus or Leviticus or anything. I think as far as I know, he's only done Genesis, but I've read I've read the entire book of Genesis with this translation, and it's actually fantastic because it allows us to think about what is being said. It allows us to kind of like, okay, what does he mean when he says this? What is he saying here? And there's just a couple of passages that stuck out to me. When he said, verse 29, if you look at your translation, and Elohim said, look, I have given to you every plant seeding seed that is upon the face of all the land, and every tree in which there is fruit of a tree, seeding seed to you. It will be for an edible thing. Now we can draw out what that really is trying to say. I will give you every plant that has seed, and I will give you every tree that has fruit for you to consume. It'll be for you, right? We can get the idea behind it, but the way it says it in the Hebrew, it just lays it out the way it is, and it's kind of like a transparent perspective on that. So I think it's just such a great translation. So I would encourage you, these two books are absolutely amazing. Go ahead, Linda.
Well, I like in verse 27 where God created the soil being.
Soil creature. Yeah.
Yeah, you're a soil creature.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's kind of interesting because he only says it about mankind. So when you read about the other ones, he says life breathers. So he brought forth life breathers of livestock, of birds, of animals, and that kind of stuff. And then, but when he gets to us, like in verse 26, and God said, let us make soil creature in our image according to our likeness. That's the first time that we read soil creature in the Hebrew. So it's the first time. So like I said, in the Hebrew, sometimes these words mean something they're very significant, especially if it's the first time it's mentioned. So prior to that, it doesn't say it. So you can see in our translations how translators have a difficult job. They not only have to translate what I just read there, because what I read was the transparent translation, which means it's a naked verse. It's a naked translation, meaning this is just simply what it says. This is as significant as it can be. How do we take that and then translate it to our language? And then how do we do it in such a way that we can understand it without losing the idiom behind it? Well, unfortunately, that has been a lost art to the point where if you just read the New Testament and you read about Yeshua, Jesus, and you read about all the stuff that happened, and you just read the New Testament from an English perspective and a Western perspective, we lose the idioms of the ancient Near Eastern world, especially that in Israel 2,000 years ago. So the same happens going back 5,900 or 800 some years, or almost 6,000 years, going back to the time of creation and seeing Adam and Eve in here. So you can see the challenges that translators have. I remember when I graduated from Christ for the Nations, I wanted to continue on to get my degree in translation. I wanted to go to Wycliffe Bible translators and become a missionary and go out to translate the Bible in a particular language. And I thought that would be really exciting, but I got married instead. That was pretty exciting too, but but I always thought it would be wonderful to be a translator, to go into a culture and learn that culture and translate their language, and then put the Bible into their language. What a challenge. So translators have done a great job, but unfortunately, by the time they came up with King James Bible, they lost a lot of the idioms. A lot of the King James translators didn't know Jewish people, didn't understand simple Jewish idioms. And so some of the idioms were lost. Okay, so that's the translation, and we'll read out of the regular translation as well. But I want to bring up a couple of things in here, okay? So this is really important. So the key to be found in understanding Genesis is not just translating the literature from the is the literature and the culture, but the key is understanding the culture from that entire world view. So reading from other cultures in the ancient Near East that have similar ideas, right? Again, we don't hold to their ideas of the gods. We don't hold to their views of stuff. I was actually sharing with my son last week on the phone. I was having a conversation with him, and he was talking to me about Norse mythology, because he's half Norwegian from his mom's side, and he really likes the whole Norse mythology of Thor and Odinson and that whole 9 yards. And we were talking, and I said, son, every false religion and every mythology, the Greek mythology, Norse mythology, but every religion on the planet all goes back to Babylon. Babylon the Great goes back to the Tower of Babel. And because he was asking me what makes, why do you think Judaism would be the right way, and why is Jesus the right way, as opposed to all these other religions that have a way to get to God too? And so I said, you have to go back with all of these. You have to look that this is mankind serving gods, and it all goes back to Nimrod and Semiramis, right? You guys have heard that Nimrod and Semiramis. Every false religion always goes back to Babylon, everything. And it's from Babylon when the world was scattered, and the languages were changed, and they took these concepts, some of them of God, and went into other cultures, but they changed it, and culturally they changed how they worship gods and did all that. And there's more to it than that. That's a real simple version of it. But I was talking with him. I said, son, just because they all have a similar background to what the Bible's saying, said it proves proves that the Bible's right, because the Bible talks about the Tower of Babel and how God confounded the languages of the people, and how they were all sent away into their own languages and cultures. And obviously there's going to be overlaps. So, but if you take, like, with Hercules and his son, and you take the Egyptian gods, you take all these gods, they all go back to Babylon. And said the difference between them and Christianity, or what the scriptures teach, Messianic Judaism, is that Yeshua came to serve. Our God came to serve and to get rid of our sins. The other people say you have to do such and such, and you serve them, and you set up temples for them. And so there's this idea that you are alive simply to worship and to serve them. Yeshua came to serve us and to set us free, so that way in return we will want to serve him. But he never commands us or forces us to do it. We have the choice to do it. So there's this different mindset that is going on with the ancient Near World. So that the key again is trying to understand the literature of that day. Okay, so that's really important. Anybody have any questions right now, or anything you want to add to this? Kathy, I think you've studied some of this in the past too. But if you guys have any,
Yeah, like the difference between our creation narrative and the Babylonian Enuma Elish is one of covenantal relation and love and partnering with God in the creation narrative versus the Babylonian narrative. It's violent, and it was created by tearing up Tiamat, and humanity was created to be servants to the gods. It's a totally different perspective.
Yeah, and you said something about Enuma Elish. We're going to talk about that. We're going to get into those as we go on with the study. We're going to read some literature from there. We're going to read some other Samaritan texts and stuff, just so you guys get this idea of what the ancients would have been thinking. But let me say this: if it came down to this, when they were, and I'll just close with this because I don't want to keep us too late tonight because we already started off late. And then next week we'll pick up. And I think next week is going to be fantastic because we're going to get deeper into this. But we're going to start looking at Genesis from a different perspective. And that different perspective isn't going to be scientific. Is it a literal 6 days? Okay, now just let me put my view. I believe that it is a literal 6 days, and I believe that the seventh day he rested. Okay, because he establishes evening and morning, he establishes all this, but there's a reason why he says all of this. And the reasons behind this isn't scientifically and it isn't the material world. For instance, we think in modern world, when I see this phone, we think, okay, we just use this phone. But there's some people who look at this phone and they want to know how did this phone work? And they tear it apart and get in there and figure out all the details and all the new. And then even when they find all the details, they're trying to say, okay, but what does this part do to help the phone get to do this so that the phone will do this? And then I could talk and, all these they're so worried about that. Today, a lot of people will approach Genesis chapter 1 with saying, okay, if he created the heavens and the earth in 6 days, okay, and he did this and he did that. And we try to tear apart all the material of Genesis 1. It wasn't written in a scientific, it's not trying to prove science. And it's not trying to prove its material perspective, so to speak. Okay, so for the ancients, they weren't worried about that. When they heard God talk about day 1 and day 2 and all this kind of stuff, it wasn't to get them to think of the material world. So this is really important. We got to get into that mindset, what the ancients would have thought. And so we're going to have to kind of almost get away from our culture. And I'll add one more thing to that, but go ahead, Linda.
Yeah, well, a good example of messing with my scientific mind is he creates light on the first day and separates light from dark, but he doesn't create the sun, moon, and stars until like day 4. I forget what day it is.
Yeah, for Linda, like smoke comes out, This is why she downloads every night between 2 and 3 o'clock in the morning. Or she updates her computer. You can hear the wires crossing and that's great. But I love this dear girl. So anyhow, the idea is, so when you approach it, especially creationists, they will approach Genesis 1 from a scientific perspective and try to prove the Bible scientifically. And then you have the people who believe in a flat earth. They will read it literal, and they'll try to read it literally and say there's literally doors in the heavens, and there's a dome, and there's this, and there's that, and they'll read it very literal, and they'll miss the nuances there. The people who believe in the round earth and try to say, well, 6 days because of this and that, they don't understand the concept of what the ancients would have understood. And what the ancients understood was, and I'll just give us a hint right here for next week. And this is why I encourage, this is one of the most fantastic books I've ever read, I got to tell you, by John Walton. And you guys may totally disagree with this, but where he's coming from as a scholar who understands ancient Near Eastern cultures and language, and they're saying this is what they would have heard in those days. And they feel like pretty confident with all the literature that they've read that helps undermine that culture of that day to strengthen them to believe what they're saying. So let me get this for you guys. So instead of thinking scientifically and how the world was created and all that stuff, you got to think purposely. The purpose behind creation. What's the purpose behind creation? So when we hear God say this, it was Vayhi erev vayhi voker yom echad. There was evening, there was morning, day 1, and God looked upon it. And remember when he looked upon it, he says, it is good. Right? Now, when he said it is good, what is the concept that we get in today's world? What do we get when we hear the word? Like, let's say we do something, it is good. What does that mean to you guys? Yeah, Linda? Don't give it away if it's.
I get a little guard star on my forehead.
You get a gold star. Okay. And it's good as opposed to bad.
Right.
Right? Okay, what do you guys get? Anybody want to, when you read in the Bible where God says, and it was good, he created mankind in his image, da da da, and then he created the heavens and the earth, he goes, it was good. What do you think he meant by it is good? Go ahead, Ingrid.
I think he means he was satisfied. He liked what he did and he was good with it.
There was a
He felt,
satisfaction behind it.
yes,
Yeah.
yeah.
Okay, that's really good. That's getting close to that concept. Kathy
Mhm.
says functional, purposeful. You're cheating. You gotta be cheating, man. She's cheating on me. I can't believe it. Okay, that's exactly right. And where what Kathy just said there is exactly. So when God looked at something, whether it was light and dark, cold or heat, evil or good or chaotic, or when he finished the thing and he established it, he says it is good. He's saying it's functional now. Now, how does he make it functional? He makes it functional for us. So mankind was always in the back of God's mind, so to speak, in the back of God's mind as he was creating things, because when we created it and he says it is good, in the ancient world, they would have said it's functional. It's now good for use. So it's like you build the bike, and instead of learning about how all the intricacies behind the chain and the sprocket, the sprockets and the frame and the tires and the wheel, all that, instead of dealing about all that, you just give it to your kid and it's functional. It works. It's trustworthy. And so this is kind of what God says. So when we that's a hint to what we're going to be dealing with next week. But so as we look into Genesis 1, because it sets the pace for everything on how to understand the whole Bible, that when he created something, he said, it is good. He's saying it is functional. So the entire creation process, if we can look at it, is going to come from a functional perspective. Why was it not good for man to be alone? Because it wasn't functional. He could not be functional in a world that he needed to be functional in. It was not good for Adam to be alone, which also means guys, it's not good for women to be alone as well, believe it or not, because it's not functional. Women cannot, because the command was what? To be fruitful and to multiply. So that was the command. So for Adam to have full functionality within a biblical worldview and from a Genesis worldview, he had to be functional. So when he looked at Adam, and he saw all the other animals 2 by 2 of their kind, and they were functional. And he said it was good. He looked at Adam and he goes, it was not good for a man to be alone. So he's not saying good or bad like we would think about good or bad today. Like, oh, wow, that's really good and that's really, really bad. He was like, it's not functional. Adam can't be functional without a helpmate. He needs a helpmate to become functional, because I've created the earth to be functional, and he's got to be the so to speak, the guardian of the earth and to be functional as well. Yeah.
One thing that you have mentioned about how each, men and women have different functions
Different
is that if the men were no longer part of the world, the infrastructure would disappear pretty much, because the men are responsible for building bridges and carrying heavy weights and doing those type of work in general.
in general. Yeah. Yeah. And vice versa, without women, we could not continue to even have a society. And women
Or
bring the
even
nurturing or having children or
Family,
yeah, family.
connections, the
Yeah.
love part, community.
I love a saying one. I read it somewhere and it was kind of a cool little list of things, but he says, and a pastor said it one time, and I thought it was really cool. He goes, I gave you a house, you made it a home. Talking about women type of thing. I give you money and you put food on the table. It was like you see the function of a man within a marriage, and you see the function of a mother, how they both bring. It's like I give you money, but you give us food and you give us clothing and you give us shelter, covering. I build a home, or I build a house, but you turn it into a home, right? Those kinds of things. So in a way, so as we go forward in this study and we look at it, remember that again, the Bible isn't trying to prove something scientifically. It's merely speaking into the functionality, okay, the purpose behind why it was created, and then why if functions. So when we look at God saying it is good, or we see something in here where it's and you always have to think in the mindset of functionality. Okay, so this is going to be a really fun study. So if we start doing that, and I got to tell you, man, I mean, you can ask Linda. I'll be reading this book. I've been reading this book now for a while, but and you know, it's just moving through this book again, the Lost World of Genesis, one by John Walton. I looked at Linda and I said, this guy says more in his introduction than most books say in the entire book. I mean, and it's just like there's many times where I've read this book, like we're at the beach one, you know, a few months ago, we're at the beach. I'm sitting there reading part of this book at the beach, and I just have to stop and I look at her, I go, holy moly. I mean, this guy says some deep stuff. And for me, it's exciting because I love the ancient Near Eastern world, and I have tons of books on them over here. And when I read them, and I love, I mean, it's just I love that desire to do it. And I want to have more time to study it because I'm just so busy with so many things. But when I read this and I read what he writes and the way he writes it, it's just like, wow, thank you, God. And then you read what James Tabor, I mean, his translation, it's a transparent, it allows me to think about it instead of having somebody's translation in there. And let me close with this last definition. Okay, so the word chesed, we've heard that Hebrew word many times, chesed. What is chesed in Hebrew? Anybody? Linda's already answered that one, but what do you guys say it is? Chesed. The way it's mostly translated in the church and in Messianic Judaism is God's loving kindness. Chesed means loving kindness. Kathy puts lots of nuances, loving kindness. Yep. There really isn't a translation in the English for that word. It's such a heavy Hebrew word that the best that they could have come up with is loving kindness. And that gives us the idea behind chesed, but it's more than just loving kindness. There's so much attached to that word that's the best that you can almost get. And one day I'm going to do a study on it to see how deep I can really get that word. But to me, it's a word of action, of sacrifice, of all kinds of stuff. It's like God's loving kindness was like the driving force to lead him to die on our behalf, to set us free because of his loving kindness, his chesed, his grace. Now that's been translated as grace as well, and it's been translated of other things, even though that word can be used in other words, but there is no really equivalent English word for chesed. Okay, so we do the best we can. With this understanding of creation, there's some idioms and ideas behind Genesis that we don't grasp if we keep looking at it from a modern day perspective, and we look at it from a scientific perspective, or if we look at it a literal perspective, because we just saw earlier, being literal doesn't necessarily give us the cultural idea, right? Let me give you one more let's do one more here. Let's see. Okay, oh, this one is good. Ya te cargo el payaso. Okay, so let me say, ya te cargo el payaso. Okay, which means the clown has already carried you. So that's the literal translation. The clown has already carried you. What do you think that means? And it's past tense. So if the clown has already carried you, okay, so.
I have a guess.
Okay.
I think you've been deceived and you've walked a while with this deception.
Okay, that's pretty good. Pretty good. But you've had to pull out from that translation, right? And now Kathy's probably cheating. She probably using AI again. Okay, so here's the literal word again. The clown has already carried you. Yater cargo el payaso. Okay, and here's what it means. You're all screwed up. So that's very close to kind of, you're screwed up. You're messed up. You're all messed up in the head, or you're all screwed up. So getting just the literal, so the people that are flat earthers that try to take the Bible very literal, okay, it's very difficult to stand on that literalism, because it's okay to be literal, because there are some passages that are literal. There's passages that are a little bit more, what's the other word, not for literal,
Artistic,
or well,
figurative.
Figurative, there you go. Figurative, and that's okay too. And God is saying some things figuratively. But what we have to do is we have to not just look at the literal words of the scriptures, but what they said and during that time. What did those literal words mean in the cultural sense, just like I said here. So we just read some literal words in Spanish that meant something totally different from us. Like the one I like the most really is, the one that's really fun is dargato or liebre, which is to give a cat for a rabbit, right? And that's kind of a cool little thing because it basically means to cheat someone or trick someone. So you switch. It's the old switcheroo. I like the old Ingrid thing, the old switcheroo. You switch something bad and you deceive somebody for something. It's like you remember when Yeshua turned water into wine and they said, wow, you waited to the end to serve the best. It's like, so what happens with most people is they deceive their guests by giving them the really expensive wine at first and then substituting all the cheap wine afterwards. So they're drunk to where they don't know the difference between the two. So anyhow, let's close with that. Anybody have questions before we close? Because this is going to be a fun study. Again, remember, we're going to come from the functionality of Genesis. Why is there stars in the sky? Why are there seasons? And this word season isn't spring, winter, summer, and fall. It's talking about Moedim. So we see the constellations are established for a function to help us stay on track with God's timetable of his feast and festivals of when he comes the first time and when he comes the second time. So there's a functionality behind it, and it's all derived or it's all designed for us. That's what's great about it. It's all designed for us, and he had us in mind throughout the entire creation. This is what's really cool. So as we look into it, it's going to be a lot of fun. Honey, would you like to close in prayer, please?
Sure. Thank you, Lord, for your amazing word that is so deep and so rich. And you give us a purpose. You started in the beginning to give everything a purpose, and you gave us a purpose, and help us to walk in that purpose to glorify you every day of our lives. In Yeshua's name, amen.
Amen.